Hello, everybody. Welcome to ADD Masterminds. I am the smooth and suave Bridge Livwat, and I'm here with Jimmy, the talking table.
That's me. That's me. It, it, it,
Oh,
it,
we're so cool.
it is I, Jimmy, the talking table.
This is, it was pretty close to that ASMR one we tried to do one time. It's pretty awesome. All right, so let's open with a non-political topic, protests. Why do people protest? Do people protest because they love other people? Do they protest because they love special causes? Do we love ideas about people more than we love people? Those are good questions. And you wrote all those. So I guess I have to answer them now, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
You're in the chair.
I'm in the chair. All right. Are we protesting because we love one another? I think there's a lot of that going on. There's this perception that there is this systemic racism problem that's going on. Obviously, there was a police officer that did something terrible, something detestable. I don't even know what's a good word for it. Heinous. I mean, when things like this happen, it's like I can never find a word that's enough. But it's like he put his knee on a guy's neck until he died, which took like 8 minutes. I didn't watch the whole video. I can't watch it. I don't need to watch it. I know it's evil.
All right.
And people talk about like, oh, well, George Floyd was a guy who did some bad things and he was terrible to women. And I'm like, yeah, sure. I mean, like, and I heard he was getting his life back on track. I don't know if he was getting his life back on track. Apparently he had a Bible study. There's so many stories about this guy. But whatever it is, he was a human being made in the image of God. And this guy put his knee on the guy's neck until he died. Something is wrong. There's a reason why people are protesting, and that's why. There's a systemic issue of police brutality. And I think it's something that's happening in the way that they are trained, and that needs to be fixed. I think that we have Black men in our country, or really, I guess it's in the States. I think we do have racism problems in Canada too. But I know, like in the United States, there is a stigma that's attached to that color of skin, and that's something that still needs to be worked through. And historically, it's been a big issue. And you go from, slavery to segregation, with Jim Crow, to mass incarceration, where you've got a drug war that targets African American communities, and that's still ongoing. And you got generations of fatherless children growing up in the inner city. So there's a lot there.
Right.
And so I think people are just angry and they're upset and they want something to change. So I think a lot of this does have to do with love for one another. I think there's definitely, you got your Instagram, Instagram influencers. I don't even really do Instagram that much. I just go there to post memes. So I wouldn't really know who an Instagram influencer is.
Me neither.
Besides, like, there's that Jenner guy. Have you ever seen that? There's like Kirby Jenner.
And not familiar.
Okay, if you get a chance, check this out. Go to Kirby Jenner on Instagram. And Kirby Jenner is like this dude with like a mustache that photoshops himself into like Kardashian pictures all the time. And it's like, what is this dude doing here? It's so funny.
He's riding on other people's coattails. That's what he's doing.
It is so great. Anyways, that's one Instagram influencer I could get behind. But anyways, Instagram influencers who are, getting their photo ops and stuff like that. And I think, it's one of those things too, where you just kind of like, it's like when a famous celebrity like gives to a cause, and they have like the big check to show everybody. Right. And it's like, yeah, part of this is like obviously them making themselves look good, But then at the same time, they're raising awareness about an issue. So it's hard to say. It's like I'm not good at judging people's hearts. I prefer to let God do that. So
No, I come from a long line of people who are great at judging other people's hearts. I'll tell you exactly what's in them. The family tradition since grandpa, way back when.
Yeah, I love those kinds of mind games, like where it's just like, oh, well, you know why he did that.
Right. You know, the thing though
I
with
think we all come from breeding that involves doing that.
right.
And I think it takes a while for us to realize, you know what, we suck at this.
Right.
Like, and it's just such a terrible way to live your life. You're trying to figure out what's going on in other people's heads. It's like, if you want to know what's going on in someone's head, ask them.
I have a hard enough time understanding what's going on in my head, let alone somebody
Oh
else's.
my gosh.
But I'll tell you I'll tell you what I think they're thinking. Where they're coming
Yeah,
from.
exactly. Okay. Do we love our ideas about people more than people? This is actually a thought I had probably like a year ago, where I was like thinking about, I'm like, man, I like the ideas that help people more than I like people.
Right.
And that's why when I get to like the barbecue and I'm sitting with people and they just want to talk about like um their cars or their new lamp they bought or their chair, I'm just like, I don't care. And it was something I was trying to work on, is being more interested in normal conversation that isn't about like making the world a better place and stuff. I'm still not very good at that. The small talk.
I
But
feel you on the small talk thing. Like I I enjoy it, but like sometimes if I sit there and all of a sudden become conscious of the fact that I've been engaged in needless small talk for like half an hour at like a family friend whatever function, and we're like not really talking about anything serious, and like I become conscious of like, oh wait a second, man, I just lost 30 minutes of my life. Like, yeah, I guess I'm connecting with this person as a human being maybe, but are we really? We're just engaged in small talk. um and like are we just checking off our nervous box by doing that? Like we feel like we have to say something because if we don't it'll be awkward, so we feel in the awkwardness.
what if,
But
it's a thought, and I think I've tried this before. What if you let somebody talk about whatever they're going to talk about? So it's like, yeah, I'm really into bull riding. And it's like, oh, okay. So, like, is it true that you have to do things to the bull to make them angry first? Like, I don't know. But I was
right,
like, how do I address this? I just back myself into a corner.
right.
Um, but you know what I mean? Like, I think there's ways to make the conversation more interesting, but let them drive the conversation, because my temptation is to take it to that controversial topic because I like digging into controversial topics. And so I know one thing you were saying is like when you get into those conversation topics, you're exhausted from arguing with people you deem to be idiots, who only see things in terms of left versus right. Okay, and then you're asking, is it mean to say that?
Right.
Um,
Like, can you just identify, like, in your mind, you don't have to necessarily say it out loud and look at them and say, you, sir, are an idiot. Although maybe
mm,
there's a place for that occasionally. I don't know. I've thought about that one. Is that, like, the book of Proverbs has no problem labeling all sorts of type of people fools and
mm.
scorners and, identifying people that you should just have nothing to do with. But, I sit there and think, is how, to what degree do you genuinely take interest in what somebody is saying, and at what point do you just make peace because you love them as a human being and you realize that if you were to try to go down the path that they're stuck on, that nothing good is going to come from that and it's just going to be something destructive. So if you truly try to engage them in like meaningful dialogue, it's just going to backfire because foolish people have no real desire to have genuine conversation. They're just talking to hear themselves talk and to have somebody not in agreement to make them feel good about themselves and their perspective. And some of them might be trying to stir the pot to get somebody to fire back at them for the, because they love to argue. I get it. I've been there. But, at what point do you have to kind of mentally disengage and just kind of like nod and like, okay, Aunt Sally, that's great. Great, Uncle Tom,
Seems like they're always family, hey?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing about it too. And I think that's where it goes back to the entire love thing too, because you realize that the hardest conversations you're probably going to have with people, and the ones that cause the most emotional turmoil, are going to be with the individuals that you love the most. And when you're looking at the individuals you love the most and realize like, man, they are in a dark place in their mind. How can I even continue on like this with them? But you still got to practice love. And I think that's where the idea of like, do we really love people, or just the idea of people? Because I think sometimes when we just love the idea of people, you kind of get this sort of dysfunctional, everybody loves Raymond type sitcom situation where everybody's yelling and talking on top of each other and giving everybody a piece of their mind. But that's not necessarily love. And a lot of people might confuse it as love. But I almost kind of take it back as like people that engage in that sort of rhetoric. And I know I'm guilty of it myself, but I'm sitting here thinking, do I really love, if I engage my, uncle, aunt, mother, or father, or whoever in this sort of idiot conversation, am I really walking in the ways of love by like, trying to genuinely talk to them about it? Or am I better off, just kind of nodding and going along? I don't know.
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is be able to check our ego at the door,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Like it's like I'm okay with not coming off as the smartest person in this conversation.
totally.
I'm gonna lay that down right away here. Um, and then kind of saying, okay, so what is that person saying, and why is it making me so angry? Am I concerned that there are people that are involved in this conversation that are being hurt by what that person's saying? And that's often the time when I engage, because
Right.
I'm just like, I can't just let you say that. This isn't helpful, and this is why it's not helpful. But I do think there's a point, and I am, one of my favorite things from last summer is there was a pastor who looked like Obi-Wan Kenobi at this.
Look like Jesus, right? No.
I don't even remember what his name is, but he looked like Obi-Wan, like old Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Oh, not young one.
No, and he said to me, I was having a conversation with him, and I was talking about my calling to be a bridge, because I think that's when I really realized it. Um, and he said to me, you know that in Proverbs it says, "Answer a fool according to his folly,"
Right.
and then on another part of Proverbs it says, "Don't answer a fool according to his folly." And it dawned upon me, it's like that's it. Sometimes you do answer them according to their folly and say, okay, let's see what happens if we follow this line of thinking. Actually, I would say that's an example of good satire. Is that good satire says, well, let's follow this line of thinking and see where it goes. So
Right.
I remember this one time we were talking about, like, I've probably shared this multiple times, but I just repeat myself. I think my listeners should know that by now. I remember I was at this like Bible study where we were talking about the will of God. And it's like there's a divine will of God, and then there's a will of God that is made up according to our bad decisions, right? And so I'm just kind of sitting here like thinking, okay, like even if that is true, how are we going to know which it is? And does it even matter at this point? You know? And so then I said, okay, well, question for you guys. And we had like a room full of couples, and I'm like, which of you actually married God's divine spouse for you, and which of you didn't? And it's like that's where it leads. And it's like that's not helpful. We're already married, right? And so I think sometimes satire is good that way. Now, usually good satire is when you've got somebody who is being dominant, and you're kind of taking them down a peg a little bit, right? It's like, okay, you're not quite as smart as you think you are. I just took your whole idea and blew it up. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but it just doesn't work, right? Bad satire would be me mocking the homeless person on the street. Oh, nice box. No, you know what I mean? And it's like, so like when you're hitting below the belt, somebody who's already down, I'm like, I got no time for that. And so that's why I'm actually don't really spend a whole lot of time with any satire sites right now. Cause I'm just like, we're in a very like pivotal point right now when it comes to racial relations. And the problem is we also are in a very polarized society. So if I were to be someone who said that Black Lives Matter, now people think that it's all, wrapped up in a certain set of politics. And so, and I get that it's complicated. I think, like when people are damaging property, that's a problem too.
Right.
And so it's hard stuff. Um, but I do think when people get very polarized, there is a point where I just kind of check out because I'm like, okay, now that you've called, you've called President Trump an idiot. I,
Right.
I probably, and it's like, okay, so President Bleep, sorry, called President Bleep an
We
idiot.
don't talk about politics, John.
And it's like, okay, so am I going to address the fact that this person just bashed a politician? Do I care? If I think that they're being a poor representative of what Christianity is, yeah, I'm going to do something about it. Like I want to push back on that and say, you know what? Like maybe that's not the right words. Maybe you can say I don't like this decision they made involving banana imports. I'm really upset about the banana import issue. I wanted yellow bananas and they brought in orange bananas.
And now my
It's like,
ice cream is weird.
yeah. Yeah. My ice cream is weird. But like to say, well, I hate Bleep's stupid face and he's stupid. It's like,
Right.
well, yeah, that's not helpful dialogue, right?
Right.
So I don't know. I only get really involved when I think that the gospel's at stake.
Right.
And so I'm like, and I'm very sensitive to the fact that there's a lot of people who have lost their faith. And it's because the church is on a quest for power through politics.
Mm.
So I'm like, can we just not do this? Like, so I know like on Sunday, we had a pastor that spoke on Gideon. And it was a great message. I'll maybe get into some of that later. But one of the things that she did is she prayed that we would be able to recognize the decoys of the enemy. And I was like, whoa, that is it. In this time right now, where we've got COVID-19 and people are debating whether they should wear a mask or not. Should we trust the experts? Should we not trust the experts? We got Black Lives Matters protesting in the streets, and we got people saying, well, I guess COVID's not an issue anymore because these people are protesting in the streets. And then we got people that are saying, well, this is garbage. Look, they trashed a Target. They trashed this store. This store owner got beat up by people associated with that riot. Like there's all these things going on and people are picking sides. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, man, these are decoys of the enemy. You talk about like Russian trolls, and it's like you'd have like those Russian trolls that would have people, that are protesting from one side and then people protesting from the other side on both sides of the street, and they orchestrated it, apparently. And I'm like, that's exactly what the enemy of our souls is doing. And just to be clear, the enemy of our souls is Satan.
Not President Bleep?
Not President Bleep.
That's
not
good.
The newspapers.
Right.
All you people waving your newspapers. Anyways.
I like that. And I guess maybe that's kind of where I'm coming from on some of this is that I feel like if I engage certain people that are living in certain places with the mentalities that they have, that I'm engaging in the decoy, and I could be
Mhm.
better
Mhm.
constructive elsewhere and do something more meaningful and significant. And like my podcast that I had this week with my friend, when we talked about Black Lives Matter and racism and
Mhm.
all that fun stuff. And it's kind of like I felt like our conversation, even though there's some things he said that I disagreed with, and maybe even disagreed with fiercely. Um, at the end of the day, I felt like we had a very mutually beneficial exchanging of ideas and meetings of the minds in a very respectful manner. And it wasn't just two clowns on TV talking over one another and
Mhm.
us mimicking that style of discussion. It was an actual real discussion and exchanging of the minds, and it wasn't into this left versus right, black
Mhm.
versus blue
Mhm.
sort of paradigm. It was like, two guys who were willing to sit down and admit where they were and have a very authentic conversation with one another. And I don't
Mhm.
feel like most people are willing to engage in that. They just want to sign up for the tribe, put on the jersey, wave the banner, and use all the jargon and all the buzzwords. And so sometimes that makes me think people are more interested in the idea of people than actually loving people, because it's as quickly as we become when I see us quickly becoming polarized and quickly becoming tribal in our stances, then I know or love left our hearts a long time ago. Um,
I
and
feel like what's really interesting to me is I feel like people are like, okay, there are certain avenues where I am an ambassador for Christ. And then there's certain areas within my life where I have a suspension of ethics. So it's kind of like when you go to your Charlotte Checkers game and you're
I'm
watching
impressed
your
to
team
remember
play
that.
and they're playing, I don't know, Houston Astros, not Houston Astros. Oh,
Toronto
I screwed it
Marlies.
up.
Toronto Marlies.
Toronto Marlies. And you just want to bash the Toronto Marlies all the time.
Right.
You've kind of taken off that ethic of being a Christian and loving your enemies. And you're
Right.
like, yeah. And when you see, that kid miss his shot, and let's say it's like overtime, it's playoffs, it's Calder Cup, and he missed his shot and he's crying, and you look at him and you see the tears in his eyes and you point at him and you laugh,
Right.
like, that's a suspension of ethics. And I feel like people are doing that also with politics.
Yep.
And they're able to say, yes, President Bleep really burnt all of those people. Yes, he
Right.
owned them
Own the libs.
in their face because I hate them,
Right.
And it's just like, I I don't I don't think we should be suspending our ethics in
Right.
any avenue. I think you can go to your Charlotte Checkers game, be happy that your team won without hating the other people. I I think that. And I think if we can do
Good.
that with sports, we can do that with politics.
All right.
I think we can actually hear people out, because honestly, I really do believe that even the people that crucified Jesus thought they were doing the right thing.
Right.
I
Totally.
actually had a bit of a debate on Facebook about that, because I asked, do you think that the Jews thought Jesus was a heretic? But the fact that Jesus on the cross says, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing.
Right.
I'm like, I think that could be evidence that they legitimately thought they were doing the right thing. I
Sure.
think there were Nazis that legitimately thought they were doing the right thing. Heck, Hitler may very well have thought he was doing the right thing. So to assume the ill intentions of
Right.
President Bleep
Mm.
or Justin Bleep or anybody, and just say,
Or the
oh well, they're
police.
just doing this because they're terrible people and they hate everyone. I'm like, no, I think they legitimately think they're doing the right thing. So let's talk about that issue and talk about why we like yellow bananas better than orange bananas. Honestly, I've never seen orange bananas. I don't know why I did
I
that.
would be so confused.
But I mean, it's like we can discuss the issue without attacking the person. And
Right.
I think that's what I want to work at. But it's so difficult because there are times where I really feel like people are misrepresenting Christ.
Oh yeah.
So, I'm a pretty nice guy, but I am going to get pretty attacky when I think that you're misrepresenting Christ.
Right.
But I know it's like I said to you when we were like doing our hangout, I'm like, you know what? I think I'm done arguing with idiots. I'm like, so if you say something crazy and I don't respond, you probably are an idiot.
The key
Not a
is
very nice
to
thing to say.
be able to do that without them realizing that you're blowing them off, right? Because then they're just be, why don't you ever say anything, or you must be on my side. You're gonna show up to the next meeting and realize you're at the Klan rally unintentionally because you didn't because they went so deep and they just thought you believed what they believed because you never argued. No.
What's funny to me too is that like people so quickly adopt labels for themselves, right? And
Right.
it's like, well, I'm this or I'm that, right? And I'm like, I don't really know what I am.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I'm just like, you guys can decide. I don't care.
It's funny
Um,
because I would label myself a pretty conservative fellow, but there are members of my family who would consider me liberal.
mhm, mhm.
And maybe by some definition I am, but I would look at them and say, well, you agree on X policy, so therefore you're the liberal.
Mm.
But then it just becomes a peeing contest to see who the most conservative or who most liberal, who's the most left, who's the most right. And it's like, there's no fruit in that. And I'm so sick. I'm so sick of it these days. Like I really can't stand it. Like my stomach like literally turns inside out, and I can't deal with it, especially when I see members of my family and people amongst my friends and people I go to church with and stuff like that. When I see that switch come on in them, I know there's no turning it off, and it's like navigating it becomes very difficult. And I don't know, maybe that's why people came up with the idea that there's two things you never talk about. You never talk about politics and you never talk about religion.
That's
Um,
dumb though.
yeah,
That's
I
dumb.
know it is, but
I
I could
think
definitely see why people kind of came up with that mantra because they realize that by talking about either, you often get into no-win situations in which people just go into their camps, shut down, and don't have any meaningful conversations. So they're like, why even bother talking about it?
I think we need to be adults. I think the problem though is that people will say something terrible and then, and it's something that is hurtful toward a group of people. And then they'll follow it up with, I'm entitled to my opinion.
All right.
And I think I've decided now that when somebody says that, I want to just call them a name and then be like, but that's just I'm entitled to my opinion.
No bleep, Sherlock.
You know what I mean though? Like, cause it's like, well, you're a whatever phobic or you're a racist for saying that.
Right.
And I have a right to my opinion. Freaking seal the deal, I don't know. The two things that are like so triggering to me is this phrase, I have a right to my opinion. Because I'm like, and I addressed this on the podcast before and I got pushed back. I'm like, how about this? I think there are things that I do not feel qualified to have an opinion on. And I think it'd be ridiculous for me to form an opinion based on the little bit that I know.
Right.
Like women in childbirth. I think you should go natural. Like, no, I'm never going to be in that situation.
Right.
Not something I need to have an opinion on. And it's stupid for me to have an opinion on. And so I can apply that to myself. Now, if I start applying that to other people, they're going to get angry with me.
Right.
And be like, say, Jimmy, as a white person, I don't think you should have a right to an opinion on Black Lives Matter. I'm okay with someone saying that to me because I'm like, I don't know. I didn't grow up in that situation, right? So I'm like, yeah, I'm okay with just listening and hearing people out. But
You
it's
know,
like,
there's one thing I respect about some scholars and academics that I've run in circles with. In fact, I was trying to get a guy to come on my podcast who's a criminologist at the local university. I go to church with him. He's got a PhD in whatever criminology and sociology and blah, blah, blah. And he teaches about, criminal justice and trains the future FBI agents and stuff of the world. And I asked him, try to get him on my podcast to come and talk about some of the hot button issues with police brutality and issues like that. And he's like, well, I know a bit about that, but I'm going to have to politely decline just simply because that's not my area of expertise. And what I would say would amount to just heeing and hawing over the little bit I know in that area. So, if it was something more in my wheelhouse, something that I'm an expert in, I would gladly come talk about it. But because I'm not, let me see if I can't get a friend or two of mine who are experts in that area to see if they would be interested in coming on. And
that's so funny.
I totally respect that because, he's being the adult. He could have been like, man, I can't wait to tell people what I think. But if he did that, he would really be stepping outside of and he probably knows more than the average person does on these type of topics.
Oh, certainly.
But he's not willing to say.
I'm like, what is a topic that I actually am knowledgeable about? I mean, I guess industrial hygiene, but I haven't done any podcasts on that.
And I haven't done a podcast on mortgage stuff from the bank. I don't know if anybody would listen to that, but
I do think, like, when I meet someone who knows more than the average person about something, I'm like, this would be interesting to talk about.
Right.
And I'm kind of disappointed when people turn me down for that reason. They're just like, well, no, I'm not an expert on this. I'm like, man, I'm not an expert on anything. I have people that are not experts on a lot of things on my podcast, right?
But I respect that.
It's good that he actually acknowledges that. And that's a very rare quality to meet someone who says, yeah, I can't talk about that. I'm not knowledgeable enough, especially as an American.
Right. Oh yeah, totally. Because we love to talk.
We love to have bold, confident assertions. To do a burn there.
Right. Well, totally. We love to have bold, confident assertions about things we just heard about 2 minutes ago. But
so that's my first one. That's my first thing that's triggering, is like this whole idea that everyone has a right to an opinion. Because I just think that there's some things. I think responsibility to have an opinion, like. If you're going to have an opinion on it, you have a responsibility to get a certain amount of experience and a certain amount of understanding before you form your opinion. I think that should be a responsibility, but I can't legislate that.
That's adult-like thinking there, John. But we talked about this earlier the week in our Facebook Hangout. Which is really cool, by the way. I like the Facebook Hangout thing.
Yeah, it's fun.
But the entire idea that I learned in my developmental psych class when I was in college, I mean, there's many moons ago, but so, I'm not going to pretend to be the expert here, but, I do remember the key concept. And the idea among psychologists is that there's basically 4 or 5 different developmental stages that we all go through in our lives and the way our brains form. And there's this 5th and final stage that happens when we're about in our mid-20s, but it doesn't happen for everybody. Not everybody gets there. And they would actually say the vast majority of people don't reach peak mental, psychological development. Some people continue to linger in stages 3 and 4 for their entire adult lives. And I sit there and wonder, sometimes are these quote unquote idiots that we're talking to or that I talk to, people that I love and care for, by the way. But are these people that I talk to, did they ever really, truly, mentally, physically develop in their brain like they were supposed to? And maybe that's why having those conversations with such individuals is like pulling teeth, because mentally, cognitively, psychologically, they never really got, for whatever reason, and there's a lot of complex reasons as to why people don't get there, but they never got there.
Hey, can you hit me with those levels? What are the levels?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but I know the final level is basically a sense of nuanced thought.
Right. That's
And
the key.
yeah,
So
like whereas like
not acquiring nuanced thought. So
right.
if you're at the level before that, you're still kind of stuck in black and white thinking.
Pretty much, and that's like what every 18-year-old thinks like, basically, because
Hmm.
every 18-year-old you've ever met has very black and white thinking for the
Hmm.
most part. Like that's where
Hmm.
most of them are. I mean, I know when I was that age, I had the fiercest, strongest, most definite, passionate opinions that I've ever had in my entire life, and I was really willing to go nuclear for every single one of them because it was just so clear that this is the way the world
Yeah,
operates.
that's
Um,
crazy. I would
and
have hated young Jimmy.
Oh, a lot of people did.
I
And
love old Jimmy.
yeah, and I think it's like, I look back and I was like, I think some of the reason maybe I'm not as popular today is because if you would have known the old Jimmy, and a lot of people have, then you would have understood maybe why Jimmy didn't rise to his potential, because Jimmy went nuclear.
Mm,
A lot of things, but I was working through my own stuff.
yeah.
And honestly, I saw a lot of it growing up, and I was just dealing with my own baggage that I was carrying from generations past. But I felt like after I went through a kind of a breaking point in my mid-20s, and I kind of hit that stage, and I realized one day, it's like I like to joke sometimes today that I didn't know what world I was even on until I was 25 years old. And I sit there and think, that was really true. And somebody pointed out, that's probably PJ's fifth stage of psychosocial development or whatever it is.
Psychosomatic,
Yeah.
Alakazam.
and so, but it makes me wonder though, the nature of the conversations we have and the difficulty and the emotional tantrums and the polarization and stuff like that is so much of that. And who knows, maybe we could find a psychologist to come on one of our shows and talk about it. But it's so much
So
of that.
what you're saying is polarized people may not just be jerks. They just might be kind of stupid.
More or less, like, and bless
I
your
think,
heart, you're just an ignorant, you're just an
yeah,
ignorant
no,
slut,
you're right though. And I think
Right,
that's something that I've realized is that um, my brain does things that not everybody's brain does.
right,
And realizing that, that doesn't mean I'm better. It just means I'm different. And
right.
so being able to understand that, some people are just not going to get me. Some people are just going to think I'm a clown. It's like, why are you talking about monkeys and guns? What a dumb song. And I'll be like, if you actually read the lyrics, there's a little more to it than that.
I look forward to trying to listen to your songs this weekend and
Yeah.
have you on my podcast to talk about them.
Yeah. I've got I've got like 4 different podcasts, I think, lined up for that.
Nice.
And so, yeah, so I'm excited to answer people's questions on it because I'm like, yeah, just ask me whatever from listening to it. And I'm like, you could play whatever you want from the album. And yeah, so it's like, yeah, it'll be fun. But
Nice.
there's, I like the idea though of, and when we talk about music, being able to entertain people and they're like, oh, well, this is a fun beat. Oh, this is kind of a fun melody. I kind of like the cadence of the rap or whatever, right? But then it's like, yeah, if you actually listen, I'm talking about how annoyed I am with you right now. That's basically what the song Hey 2 is, right? Like, it's just
Right.
like, basically, it's like, I could have a conversation with you, but it's just a waste of time. So
Right.
I just smile and say, hey. But it is pretty catchy. So, but I do think that, like, if we encounter people that are very black and white, I think what we can do is ask them questions. And that's kind of like what I was saying, where it's like answer a fool according to their folly.
Right.
And you say, okay, well, what we need is more, man, I don't know how to not get political on this, but let's just say, I want to get more Christians in politics. Okay.
Right.
Why? So we can have more godly legislation. Okay. Why? So that then people are living the way God wants them to. Oh, that sounds kind of like the Old Testament.
Right.
And so, like, if we get to that point, and it's like, you don't have to, like, okay, now repent and be baptized. All right, I've done,
Right.
but it's like just putting that seed of like, well, maybe things aren't quite as black and white as you're making them out to be.
Right.
But you don't say that. because they might be like, well, I don't know what you mean by black and white. Like, is this a race thing? I don't know. But it's like knowing that, like, I think it's like I love this. I was reading. I tried to go through all of C.S. Lewis's works, and I didn't really finish it. But I did like because I got like all of his works for like $2 on Kindle, which is awesome.
I had a cousin that majored in the writings of C.S. Lewis in college.
So the space trilogy, really weird. I'm not great on narratives. I think my problem is like I read a lot, but I probably don't read every word.
Mhm.
And so narratives, I'm like, what's going on now?
Right.
But I read this narrative. It was one of the space trilogies, and it tells the story about this guy who gets like abducted by aliens. Oh no, sorry. He gets abducted by humans and taken to an alien planet, and he spends all this time hanging out with the aliens because he escapes from his captors, and he's hanging out with the aliens, and he sits down and he listens to them and he watches how they interact. He's a linguist, and he takes the time to listen to them and learn their language. And then he knows enough of their language that later on, his captors have been found out to have killed some aliens, but his captors never had taken the time to learn the language.
Hmm.
They think they're better than the aliens. And so they have no interest in learning anything about the aliens. They end up in a court battle for killing an alien. And this man who was once their victim is now the only person that can communicate with them in this court battle. And it made me think, have the humility to learn the language.
Hmm.
And so I think about that a lot. And so I'm like, if I'm encountering somebody who is polarized and they were like 100% left or 100% right, I'm going to sit down with them and think, okay, so what's a language they can understand? What are words I should not be using? And I think even, like I've been encountered a couple people on Twitter now who say, don't use the word God, it's triggering to me. Now, if I was a staunch religious conservative, I might laugh at them. It's like, what? That's so stupid.
I've got in caps.
But yeah, exactly. I'm going to use God in caps because that's where I run because I love God, right? But it's like, no, I think there's ways to actually listen to people and communicate at a level they can understand. And so when I encounter someone who's been very messed up by religion and they're very polarized, they're very against Christianity, I say to them, do you believe in love? So I think love is calling you right now. And I think about how like the Bible says God is love. And it's like, can we work with that? And so I think if I can work in that avenue, can I work with the staunchly religious person that's saying terrible things and hates every person who is not religious?
Right.
How do I deal with that? Well, learn to speak the language. Have the humility to learn to speak the language. Well, they like the Bible. Okay. So I'm going to find a scripture to point them to, you know, to tell them like why hating everyone's probably not a good thing. Probably. Heck, they might even like be King James only.
Oh gosh.
Right. And so it's like, we'll have the humility to learn the language.
Right.
I will not insist on using the NIV with them or whatever. I'm going to use the King Jamesian.
Right.
Thou shalt not. No, I don't know. But I think that's it. And I think we need to have the humility to be okay with not having to use our words. And I think that is something I'm trying to come to grips with right now when we talk about evangelism, because I'm just like, people have had enough of this whole, like, I know everything. You guys don't know anything. So let me tell you about everything that I know. It's like people don't want that. But if we can be the salt the salt that brings the flavor that's already there. I really believe that's what God's calling us to do right now. So what's already there? You've got somebody who has been rejected by the church for whatever reason. There's something in their life that people are like, oh, well, obviously you don't care about Jesus because you're really into orange bananas. And, and so orange bananas, that's going to be the title of this episode, isn't it?
I affirm that. That's a great. You're gonna get like people looking for like Food Network. The podcast is gonna be great.
It's a hybrid between an orange and a banana. Wait a second, it's a crime against nature.
There's this guy that's about a table, and his name's Jimmy, and they're talking about orange bananas, and yeah,
Jimmy.
But I think you're onto something there with like, and maybe a way like something that kind of pops in my mind when I'm hearing you talk about this is that what we need to do is kind of help nudge people in the direction they should probably go, or that we think they should maybe go, but not in this kind of forceful way in which we feel like obligated to make a strong point and the strongest point possible, but like you say, like learn their language and almost help them ask a question that they would ask using the words that they would use in a way that draws it out of them and like it sparks their sort of inner curiosity. Because we're all very defensive. When somebody looks at us, points a finger and says, you're wrong. Well, just the walls come, you're not going to get any further in that conversation. And most of that conversation usually ends up being just our own self-vindication and expression of our own righteousness on something, or sense of self-righteousness. And, so it almost feels like we need to get them to intuitively ask the question that they never asked, but it makes it seem like it came out of their own, psyche, and to maybe help nudge them to that next level. Because unless that, it's kind of like, you ever see the movie Inception?
Yeah.
Where they talk about planting a thought in the dream.
Mm-hmm.
And man, it's been such a long time since I've seen that movie, so I might be butchering it.
It's funny though, because this is feeling a lot like apologetics.
Right.
And one of my beefs with apologetics is that it assumes I have something to share with someone and they've got nothing to share with me. So I'm going to add to this as well, that we need to start with the notion that every human being we encounter has something to teach us that we don't already know.
Right.
And with that assumption, you're going to approach them with humility. And when you approach them with humility, they will actually listen to what you have to say.
That's good.
I was listening to Beth Moore's book. Hey, see, I just mentioned a woman preacher.
Wait a second. Was it a book about making sandwiches?
Yes. No, it was a book about wine, Jimmy. It was food related.
She should totally make a sandwich book. She should get together with Jeff Morrow from the Food Network, who is known as the Sandwich King, and she should do a cookbook with him.
Well, it's funny because like because the church I go to now is like it's a denomination that has finally started ordaining women. And the denomination I was in before has had like ordained women like forever, right? And so while this lady was preaching, and it was like so good, like I was like, I gotta friend her on Facebook. I like everything she has to say. I was like turning to one of my kids, and I'm like, yeah, but she's a woman. I can't listen to what she has to say. But yeah, so I was listening to another woman preacher, Beth Moore. Her book, it's something about the vine, staying in the vine. But it's all about wine and how wine's in scripture and stuff. But something really stuck in my mind is she said something about the fruits of the spirit, and she says sometimes we get drunk on our own fruit. And I was like, whoa.
Boom.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, so it's getting self-absorbed as we do ministry. And I think that is something that I'm so cognizant of, and I wonder about that with people who are in full-time ministry.
Right.
And I mean, like anybody who gets any kind of attention for their ministry, it's so easy to get drunk on your own fruit.
Oh yeah.
I like so in the story of Gideon, she said, actually this is the other preacher now. I like how this is kind of mixing together. Women preachers, they're all preaching about the same thing. No.
Orange banana. No.
So there may be better people for the job, but God has picked you. That was the message that was given to Gideon. I'm like, how humbling is that? There may be better people for the job, but God has picked you.
Right.
It's actually speaking to me right now in podcasting. I'm like, dang, there's so many people that are better at this.
Oh yeah.
But God has picked me for my little audience.
Your
You
little.
guys are adorable. I love all of you.
You called them by name.
Audience. We need a nickname for them. Oh yeah, ADD Master Minions.
There you go.
Yep. Man, I don't remember what the trumpet and torch represent, but it's kind of interesting that they had to go around with a trumpet and a torch. It's like to be a light and to be the trumpet that's sounding the presence of God, I guess.
Sure, that works.
Yeah, I like that. It's beautiful. Oh, you were asking, do I personally know anyone who has the COVID? No, I have not.
Interesting.
My son knows a kid who had it, and they said basically it was like death. They like had trouble breathing. It was really scary.
The landscape company that does my yard, it's a 2-man company. One of the guys that cuts my yard and trims it and everything, makes it look nice for me. He came down with COVID. The other guy, even though they ride in the same car together all day, every day, the other guy tested negative, but one of them tested positive. So I was like, man, like this is literally happening in my backyard. You know,
How's he doing?
Good. He's not being hospitalized or anything like that. He's in isolation, and he's not working right now, but he appears to be healthy other than he just happened to test positive for COVID.
I like that you have a guy that does your lawn.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's $100 a month and I have about a third of an acre. So it's like,
That's not bad.
no, like it's dirt cheap. And, so like, you know, it's like, man, my yard would take me it takes him about half an hour to do my yard, and it's a 2-man team and they have a professional landscape mower. So I figured it'd take me at least an hour and a half, 4 times a week. I was like, that's worth $100.
Nice. Nice. Well, yeah, I think about that sometimes. You know, when you
Yeah.
talk about home improvement too, it's like,
Right.
I'd rather hire somebody.
Right.
My time's worth a lot to me.
Right.
Hey, so Simpsons moment. I know you don't watch The Simpsons, hey? But
Not since my parents forbade me as a child, John.
forbade you. They
Yeah.
forbade you.
They forbade me.
All right. So I was watching this episode where Lisa takes Homer to a new age store. And he walks in, the lady looks at him and says, "Namaste." And he looks at her and he says, "And an ooga booga to you too." Just so funny. Do I ever watch random Netflix shows to find out if you'll like them or not? No, because I'm still stuck on The Simpsons. I did start Space Force with one of my sons.
Nice.
I think I understand why America needs a Space Force now.
Totally.
Pretty good. Have you seen it at all?
Yeah, my wife and I watched the entire thing already.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not that far into it yet. I think we're like
Okay.
episode 5 or 6.
Okay. Well, you only got, that's about halfway, so.
Okay, like that whole thing with the monkey was pretty awesome.
It was, and the poor dog.
Yes, sad. Sad. No spoiler there.
No spoiler.
Well, we just had some technical difficulties and it like all got cut off, and so I think we were just about done anyways.
Can I spin around? Nope, I got my headset on. I can't spin around.
But it was fun having you on again, Jimmy. I love doing this show.
It's fantastic.
Like we were saying, like it's a pretty chill thing to do as a podcaster, and it's therapeutic. And I hope it is therapeutic for you all to listen to.
And hopefully
Um,
it helps people grow beyond the stage 5 brain development.
yeah, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Should have researched it before we did this part.
I know. I like just making things up, though. I mean, this is so American just to have an opinion on something with knowing little about
So
it.
American. It's as American as orange bananas. All right. Well, thank you, Jimmy. And
Thank
thank
you.
you, listeners, my master minions. Much love.
Namaste.
Ooga booga.
Air smudge.